Okay, in this challenge, you are going to repeat variables. So first, you are going to create two variables, first name and last name. And obviously, I want you to set their values to your first name and your last name. And then concatenate the two variables into a third variable called full name, so that you have your full name. Finally, log full name out to the console. Go ahead and give this a shot right now, and then I will show you my solution when you return back to this screencast. Okay, let's do this. I'll do first name equals pair, and then I'll do let last name equals Borgen, like that. Then we need to concatenate the two together. Let full name equals first name plus last name, like that. Finally, I want to log it to the console. Console.log full name. Now I can run the code, and as you can see, we're logging Per Borgen to the console, but there's no space in between the two names. So I could achieve this in a multitude of ways, either by adding a space here, now it's better, or adding a space before Borgen, still good. However, neither of these are optimal, since I want the first name and last name to be the name and the name only, not an extra space. So what I'll do instead is in between here, I'll add an extra space, like that. Running the code, there we go. Now first name and last name contain only the characters of my name, but we still get the space by adding this third string here when we create full name. So, no matter how you did it, great job, let's move on. In this challenge, you are going to create a function that logs out "Hi there, Linda" when called. And you have to use the name and the greeting variable inside of the body of your function. And also, there's a comma and an exclamation mark you also have to include so that you get this exact string logged to the console. So go ahead and solve this one, and then I will show you the solution afterwards as well. Okay, let's do this. Create a function. I'll call it greet Linda, like that. Here we are going to console log first the greeting, then we have to plus the comma and the space, and then plus again, then the name, and then plus again, and then the exclamation mark, like that. Final step, to check our code, we need to run it. Greet Linda, like that, running the code, and there we see this exact string in the console. Great job. In this challenge, you are going to practice your incrementing and decrementing skills. So let's say that you are building a game and the player is collecting points, which currently are at 3, and you need to create two functions, one which is called add 3 points, and one which is called remove 1 point, and of course then have these add and remove their given points from or to the myPoints variable. So remove 1 point should decrease myPoints with 1. Add 3 points should add 3 points to the myPoints variable. And your job is to create those two functions and then call them however many times you need to call them in order for this line down here to log out the number 10. So you are going to write your code in between here. You can add as many lines as you want, but when you eventually run the code, myPoints should be 10, and you should only have changed myPoints via calling these two functions a number of times. So go ahead and give this one your best shot, and then I of course will show you the solution afterwards as well. Okay, hopefully that went well. Let's do it together. We'll do function add 3 points. What I will do is take myPoints and plus equal 3. Function remove 1 point, and that should do myPoints minus equal 1, like that. Okay, now we have them, which means that we just need to call them a couple of times. We are at 3, and we need to get it up to 10. What I will do then is I'll first do add 3 points, call that 3 times, because then we'll go up to 12. My calculation is correct. Let's run this. Yes, we are indeed logging 12. That means that we can remove 1 point 2 times. That should get us to 10. Yes, we are logging out 10, so we have solved the challenge. Great job. Okay, it's time for some strings and numbers repetition. You are going to add a bunch of strings and numbers together and try to predict what the result is. So here, after each one of these lines, I've added 2 slashes. That means that you can write your prediction. Try to go through all of these and then run the code and see how you did it. And then I will give it a shot afterwards as well. Good luck. Okay, starting on the number 2. That is a string plus a number. We know that JavaScript then turns both of these into strings, so it becomes 22. Here, 11 plus 7, that's just 2 numbers. We get 18, and as a number this time, and not as a string. 6 plus 5, you might be fooled to think that JavaScript would treat this as a number calculation since the number is first, but no, actually, the string wins, and it becomes 65. Likewise, with this one, here it's very natural to think that what you want to do is add these 2 points together so that my points is 14, but no, since you have a string here, everything will be turned into a string, and the result will be my points, colon, 59. 2 plus 2, that's 4, just a number. And finally, 2 strings, of course, becomes a string, 1114, like that. Let's run this. And indeed, all of my predictions were correct. Phew, that was good. Otherwise, I would lose all my integrity, so I'm really happy about that. Let's move on. Okay, let's imagine that you are working on an e-commerce website, and this website sells shoes. So here you can see a Nike shoe with a purchase button. The HTML is located here, of course, with an image tag, the paragraph for the Nike shoe, the button, but then there's also an empty error paragraph. And this is pretty common because in case there's an error happening, for example, the purchase didn't go through or some kind of bug caused the operation to fail or whatever it is, we want to render something inside of this paragraph. So that is your job in this challenge. You are going to set up the JavaScript so that when the user clicks on the purchase button, you are to render out something went wrong, please try again, in the paragraph that has the ID of error. That's of course this one. And the button they will click is of course that one. You can see there is some CSS here, but you're not going to worry about that because this challenge is all about the JavaScript and of course also hooking up the onClick event listener on this button. You should know how to do that by now. And you should also know how to render text inside of a paragraph. So go ahead and give this one a shot, and then of course I will show you the solution afterwards as well. So there are 2 parts to this challenge. First, there's registering that the user clicks on the button, and then there is rendering out the text in the DOM. So let's take first things first, the button. So I'll head over to the button and do an onClick event listener. And here we need to specify which function we want to run. We haven't written any function yet. So let's do that. We'll do function. I'll call it purchase because that's what the user is trying to do. Open and close curly brackets. Now I can take this function and specify that when the user clicks the button, we want to call this function. Good stuff. Let's just console log out button clicked. On this code, try to click the button, and yes, we are rendering out button clicked. Good. The next step is to grab a hold of the paragraph that we are going to render text inside of. So we'll do let error paragraph and do document.getElement by ID, passing in error like that. Yet again, we can do console log just to verify that we have grabbed a hold of the right paragraph. We run the code and bring up the console, and yes, we can see that we have the paragraph. Then inside of the purchase function, this is where we want to trigger the rendering of the error text. I'll do error paragraph dot text content equals this string right here. Now, if we rerun the code, Click the purchase button. Yes, something went wrong. Please try again. And as you can see, it's rendered out in red text, which is very common because we want to grab the user's attention and tell them that something wrong has happened. And that's, of course, something we have specified in the CSS. But this challenge is not about CSS. It was about JavaScript. So great job solving this. Let's move on. Okay, in this challenge, you are going to create a very basic calculator. As you can see in the mini browser here, I've set up the UI for you. Here we have two buttons. Here we have the numbers, 8 and 2. And then there's 4 buttons, add, subtract, divide, and multiply. If I try to click one of these now, nothing happens. But what you then, of course, want to happen is that, for example, if you hit subtract, you are to take 8 minus 2, which is 6, and then render that out in the sum here, so that it'll say sum : 6. Taking a look at the HTML, we can see that the numbers at the top, num1l and num2l, that's the 8 and 2, are simply spans. However, they are empty. So how come we have content in them when they are rendered? Well, that is because I'm doing that in the JavaScript, first defining two let variables, num1 and num2, and setting them to 8 and 2, and then doing document, get element by ID, fetching out num1l and num2l, and setting each of their text contents to num1 and num2. And that's why we're rendering out these numbers. Moving on to the buttons, you can see that they are very simple. Only the tag and the text. I have not created the event listeners because that's your job. And then finally, the span with the ID of suml is where you are going to render out the result of the calculation. So, summing this up, you are to create 4 functions here in the JavaScript file: add, subtract, divide, and multiply. And then you need to call the correct function when the user clicks on one of the buttons. So obviously, when the user clicks the add button, you are to call the add function, and vice versa with all the others. Then inside of the functions, you are to perform the given calculation. So in add, you need to add num1 and num2 together, and subtract, you will take num1 minus num2 and divide, and so on. Finally, render the result of the calculation in the paragraph that has the ID of suml. So go ahead and give this one a shot, and then of course return back to the screencast when you want to see my solution. Okay, let's do this. I'm going to start by creating here an onClick event handler and call this function add, because when the user clicks the add button, we want to convoke a function which are to be named add. And then we need to create the function add. Here, what do we want to do? First, we just want to check that it works. Run the code, add. Yes, we are logging it out. Now, then we need to grab a hold of the sum paragraph. So I'll do let suml equals document get element by ID. And the ID is sum-l, like that. And here, I'm just going to see if it works by doing suml.text content equals num1 plus num2. Rerunning the code. And yes, there we can see we're rendering out 10. However, we wanted to render out sum : equals 10. So let's try adding that. Sum : plus num1 plus num2. Rerunning the code, hitting add. And now we have come into a situation where actually JavaScript is turning all of our 3 values into strings. As you remember, when you add strings and numbers together, they're all turned into strings. What we need to do here is first perform the calculation and then concatenate that with the string. So we'll do let result equals num1 plus num2, because here we're only adding numbers together, and JavaScript will treat them as numbers and thus perform a mathematical calculation and not a string concatenation. So then we can replace this expression here with result. Rerunning the code, clicking add, and yes, there we go. Great stuff. Now, I'm a little bit lazy, so I'm just going to copy this, paste it in, and do subtract, and simply replace this with a minus. Add the onClick equals subtract subtract, like that, running the code, clicking subtract. Oh, sum is 6. Brilliant. Now, we'll just copy paste again. Divide should get this, use the division symbol, and multiply should use the multiplication symbol. Now we only need to add the last two event handlers. Divide is the name of that function. Space here, and multiply is the name of the final function. Running the code, trying add gives 10, brilliant. Subtract gives 6, that's correct. Divide rightfully gives 4, and multiply 16. We have made a calculator. Good job. You have all reason to be proud of yourself now. And if you didn't manage to do this one, if you found it a bit too hard, now that you've seen the solution, just go back and try it again. That's great practice and gives you the muscle memory you need. And when you're ready, I'll see you in the next cast.